Today's episode is for all of you parents out there who are stressed out, flying by the seat of your pants, desiring more harmony and peacefulness in your life. My guest today is going to help you do that. She is Jenny Hoskins. She's the author of Brave Enough to Fly, her brand new book, out now, available on Amazon. She's also the creator of the Peaceful Parenting Method. And in this episode of the podcast, we talk about peaceful parenting. She shares some insights and ideas about how you can create more harmony within your home and have a better experience with your child, just as in general. And we also talk about her new book, Brave Enough to Fly, some of the messages you'll find in the book. I've read the book. It's really beautiful. The artwork is just fantastic. It's watercolor artwork. It's obviously took some time and thoughtfulness put into the pictures and the story. I really thought it was an awesome story with great messages of courage, faith, persistence, and even a little gem at the end. I don't want to give away the end of the book there, but there's a great message that every child needs to know, something that they will be able to carry with them for the rest of their lives. And I don't want to share that with you. We do talk about it in this episode of the podcast, but definitely pick up the book. It is well worth it. It's filled with so much goodness. Before we get into the episode, let me remind you that you can always find the podcast and listen to the podcast, Enhancing the Human Experience, on any of your favorite podcast players. And one of the best places to listen, in my opinion, is on YouTube. Now, that is because you can create playlists, and you're probably going to want to create a playlist for peaceful parenting. And you can put all of the good stuff that you start to find in this episode, but also from different places around YouTube. Start yourself a folder, start putting some of these tools into your bag of tricks as a parent so that you can refer to them back. So I like YouTube for that aspect because you can create those playlists and refer to them all the time. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/gmarkphillips. And this episode, as well as every episode of Enhancing the Human Experience, ultimately goes up on YouTube in addition to all the podcast players. So I think it's a really great place to listen, comment, share it, all the things that YouTube is awesome for. So without further ado, let's get into the interview and let's see what Jenny has to say about helping you create more harmony and peacefulness in your parenting. Jenny, thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me, Mark.
Absolutely. So, I introduced you briefly during the first segment of the podcast, but why don't you tell the listeners what you do in your own words a little bit?
All right. So I actually do a few different things. So I have a full-time job working as a pediatric speech language pathologist, and I specialize in teaching social cognition and social emotional development, and along with teaching kids who have communication delays and communication disorders how to communicate more effectively. And then I also have an online business where I teach peaceful parenting. And I do that through blogs and Facebook Lives, and also some courses that I have. And I also teach kids mindfulness and kids yoga. And I'm also a children's book author.
You are busy. You got a lot on your plate.
Yeah, I like to keep my schedule full, and I like to have my energy going in a lot of different directions, especially when it's stuff that I'm passionate about.
Doesn't that make all the difference? When you're passionate about it, you can just work all the time and it's not even work, right?
Right. It feels energizing to me, and it gives back to me as much as I'm giving out to it. So, yeah.
So let me just, if we could talk about that briefly for a moment, because I think, you carved out a little slice there. I just want you to touch on, was there a point in time when you transitioned to more doing your passion work here, or have you always been gradually moving in that direction? Because I think a lot of people struggle with this, like where to put their energy and where that vein to do their life's work in. Can you just chat briefly about that?
Sure. So I think it's been an evolution, and I think it's probably that way for a lot of people. So I've always worked with kids. I've worked with kids for close to 18 years now, and I've worked in different capacities. I worked in a group home with special needs kids for a while, and then I did one-on-one behavior intervention for special needs kids. I taught English in Taiwan to kids, and then I got my master's degree, speech language pathology, and started working in a clinical setting. And then I really became passionate about how could I serve the kids that I was working with most effectively. And what it came down to is really treating the whole child and really looking at how do they learn best, what are their personality styles, are their needs being met, and how could I approach that from a holistic point of view. So then I started, I took a children's yoga specialization class. I started reading more about child development and, social emotional development. And so, like I said, I treat a lot of kids who have a variety of communication delays, but I've started to really focus and hone in more on the social emotional piece. And then I wrote my children's book that came out of kind of my own personal experience and my own personal growth, and just sharing that message of growth, and hoping that it would help kids too.
Yeah.
So.
And I definitely want to dive into that book as well. I thought it was super awesome. The story, the message, the illustrations, it's really cool. Now, share with us, when will that book be available for purchase?
So hopefully I just published it yesterday on Kindle Direct Publishing. And so they have to review it. And then after they give the okay, it should be available within 72 hours. So hopefully by Monday.
So it's coming soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's called, the book is titled Brave Enough to Fly. And tell us about that book.
So Brave Enough to Fly is a story about a young girl named Annie, and her family is getting ready to move to another city. Her mom just got a promotion at work, and she's feeling a little bit apprehensive about this new change that's coming in her life. And in the story, she has a dream where she meets a butterfly named Ina, and Ina actually means grace. And so in the story, Ina tells Annie about her own experience with transformation, going from egg to caterpillar to cocoon to butterfly, and that all of the experiences that she had and the thoughts and feelings that she had and the resistance, but then she was able to use the values of curiosity, courage, perspective, and faith in order to move through each of those transitions with more grace and ease, and to be able to really learn from those transitions, and turn it into a learning experience for her in her life.
Yeah, and I love the metaphor you draw with the butterfly, and because that's like the transformation, and and especially I really love the fact that you focused on when she's emerging from the cocoon, the struggle is what she needs to do for herself growth, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I put that in there intentionally. Yeah, exactly, for that that symbolism, that it is through that struggle, it is through that difficulty, that we get the resilience and we get the strength that we need to become what we're meant to be, and to be what we're meant to be. And so.
Yeah. Do you find in your work that there's a general sense, do you find that children want life, or whatever they're going after, whether it's working with them in a speech pathology aspect or yoga, do you find that they want it to be easy? I mean, because I think there is this, we have a culture of instant gratification and zero struggle, because we always see the overnight success, or the quote unquote overnight success. What do you find in your work as far as that kind of ideology with the struggle?
Well, I think it really depends on the kid, Mark. Every child is different. You definitely have those kiddos that when they first hit up against resistance, they want to quit. The first moment of resistance, and sometimes you got to kind of figure out, like, are they really just being lazy, I guess? Or, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily the case for any kid, but you've really got to figure out what is it that's causing that resistance in them. I think there's also a lot of kids, there's this idea that when something's hard, it means it's bad. Like there's this association, that kind of this black and white thinking that when something's hard, it's bad, or, we don't want to do it because easy means good. And so I think it's good to teach kids that it's okay for something to be hard and difficult. And it's okay to not be able to do something perfectly the first time. And yeah, definitely teaching kids perseverance is, I think, really essential. I'm thinking about this kiddo that I worked with. She was about 4 years old at the time, and she was one who kind of gave up pretty easily. And she was looking for a particular toy in this big bin of toys, and she kind of looked and she couldn't find it. And she was like, I can't find it. I need help, And so I actually told her to think about, I was like, okay, tell me about who your heroes are. Who do you look up to? And she said her dad. And I said, okay, well, how would your dad look for your toy? And I want you to look for it just like your dad would do it. And oh my gosh, she was like a totally different kid. She just went to town looking through all the toys. I've never seen her so committed. And sure enough, she found it and she got it, and she was so proud of herself, and I was so proud of her. So
did she kind of reflect back on that experience and have a moment of growth in that, about that tool that you gave her to kind of like embody her dad?
She never verbalized it, but I could see in her face and in her facial expressions and in her body language and just the way that she was carrying herself, I could see that something had clicked in her.
Yeah.
And then I think just that feeling of accomplishment is so gratifying, for anybody and for kids. And it's really cool to see when they have that experience or they have that aha moment, even in something as simple as that, but that's where it starts, with those simple things.
They are it builds. And I think you touched on something really important, because, a lot of successful people say that they actually like reinvent themselves and redesign themselves to be in alignment with the goals that they want. And I think there's this pervasive thinking in our culture that is really kind of detrimental, that is something to the effect of like, well, the successful person is just born that way, or they're gifted, or they're this. No one sees the hard work. No one sees the internal struggles that go on. And so I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Brave Enough to Fly, and you're it's about the resilience, the courage, the perseverance. Like I said, the messages you've got in there are super awesome. I think parents are just gonna love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so your illustrator, you worked with an illustrator to create the images, you wrote the copy. Talk about the process that, like you said, for your own journey, and that was a book which it seems like it definitely came out of you. Talk about your experience writing that book and it being part of your story and your journey.
Wow. Well, I think it's been a few years since it started. Writing a book takes a long time, and especially when you have illustrations, and these were watercolor illustrations. So, and then
they're beautiful, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah. Julie Pagan, she's a local artist here in Boise, and she did an amazing job. And it was just, she created something that I couldn't have even imagined for the book. It was just beyond what my expectations. So, Yeah. So honestly, it was a few years ago, and I was endeavoring to make some changes in my life on a personal level. And they were some changes that were going to have a positive impact on my life, but I found myself resisting them, right? Like that's the thing with transition is I think that no matter what the transition is, whatever the change is, there's still some resistance we come up against. And I was actually in a yoga class and I was, doing my vinyasa flows. And I was thinking about why am I being so resistant to making these changes? And then for some reason at that moment, my mind started to think about butterflies. And I thought, in nature and, they don't, butterfly doesn't resist its transformation. It doesn't resist its growth from one stage to the next. And I wonder what it might be like if I could be more graceful and move through my life transitions as gracefully as a butterfly does, or, any sort of thing in nature. And then the next day I was just talking to a friend of mine about my thoughts and feelings. And then as I'm talking to him, it just occurred to me that might be a really cool children's story. And so I started writing it, and it just unfolded fairly easily. And yeah, the rest is history.
Wow.
I got connected with Julie and reached out to her and, was really nervous about it. And,
I can
is
imagine.
she gonna
Yeah.
say yes?
It's a big endeavor.
Yeah. Yeah. And she agreed to do the illustrations. And it's just been a really cool collaborative project. And it's really cool to see it finally come into fruition and actually hold a hard
Absolutely.
copy of it in my hand.
So you do. So you have? Do you have the hard copy proof, or is that coming down the road here pretty soon?
Yes, I got the hard copy proof in the mail because I wanted to make sure that everything looked okay before I published it, and it's solid. It's good to go. So that was really exciting to finally get a proof, because I've gotten several proofs, and there's been just little kinks here and there to work out, and so this is the first proof that I got that's finally clean and looks how I want it to look. So it's really exciting.
Until you go through the process there, I don't think people know the little subtle things that need to happen. And like you said, there's time delays and time lags, and you want to rush it, but you don't want to, just put something out that's not awesome, which your book looks totally amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a process, and I'm so fortunate and blessed to have a team of people helping me, because the design part of it, like you said, the little things, like there's little things like the bleed, on a page I didn't know about, or the sizing of the images, and all these little things that go into making sure that it looks nice at the end of it. And that's graphic design is not my area of expertise, so I'm glad I have people to help me do that.
Well, and you're drawing on the strengths of those people who are pros in graphic design. You're pro in your arena, and so I think when that comes together in the collaboration, you get an exceptional product at the end.
Yeah, it's that collaboration and that cooperation for sure.
What size hardback are you going to be producing?
So it's actually going to be a softback, because
softback.
Kindle Direct Publishing does not offer hardback option at this time that I know of.
Right.
It's about, I think it's 8.5 by 11.
Okay, so it's big. Yeah. It's big. It's going to be nice and big. Well, and it should be to present those pictures, those wonderful watercolors.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so and I will put links to that in the show notes on my website, gmarkphillips.com, linking back to the book when it comes available. Let's talk about your course. You're going to help. Sure. Sounds like you're going to help some parents alleviate some headache.
Yeah, I hope so. So it's a 14-day training, and it takes place online within a private Facebook group. It's called the Peaceful Parenting Method, 14 Days to Harmony in Your Home. And a big component of it is learning how to first understand your child and why they might be acting the way they are. And I kind of talked about that earlier, that, some, like if a child is, being resistant or not following through with an activity, getting to the root of why they're doing that is really essential so that you can help them move through that struggle. And so the big component of that is of my training is helping parents to understand their child's behavior. And then also learning how to communicate with your child in a way that's more effective so that you can get them to listen, you can get them to cooperate. And then there's another component of the training that really focuses a lot on helping parents to manage stress in their own lives. Parents and families are so busy these days. And I think it's essential to really simplify or endeavor to simplify your life as much as possible. And to for parents to also make sure that they're engaging in self-care and they're taking care of their own needs and their own energy management so that they're able to respond to their kids rather than be kind of reactive, and so that they can actually use the tools that I'm giving them in those moments of stress. So that's kind of the gist of the training.
Yeah. Well, and I see that, and we talked about this when we talked a few weeks ago too. And I see that parents are so busy, and it sounds like you're addressing something that's really important, is the fact that, hey, you're going to give them all these tools, but if they don't have the space to actually implement them, I think a lot of people get great information and great knowledge and great tools and wisdoms, but don't have that carved out space. And so it just goes to the wayside and then back to business as usual. So I think what you're doing there is really awesome. How did you decide or come up with that? I mean, obviously that's grew out of your own work up to this date, that, helping them simplify so they can put the tools in play.
Well, I think it's been kind of an evolution, and it's taken place over the last year of, me putting content out there on, my Facebook page, and listening to parents, really observing them, getting feedback from them, and just really figuring out what it is that they're needing, and how I can use my experience and my expertise to fill that need. And so that's how Peaceful Parenting Method was created, was just really in an effort to fill a need that parents have. So
yeah, and I think you're right on the money, because I see out there in the world that it seems like parents are kind of like micro parenting as they go, instead of creating this like foundation of, like you said, peaceful parenting and harmony. They're kind of constantly hurting their child along in every little activity, like do this, don't do this, stop, go. It's like this constant insanity that appears of insanity from the outside looking in. So you're kind of like breaking down that whole structure and saying, hey, don't stop doing this craziness, and giving them some fundamentals, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, and I know parents, they're doing the best they can, and sometimes it is just like, let's just get through the day, right?
Mm-hmm,
but I want to give them, tools and strategies to not just get through the day, even though that's going to be the reality sometimes. But I want to give them tools to really thrive as a family and to help their kids thrive. And so I think that comes from having strategies in place, having systems in place, having a plan, and being consistent, and I think that's important too, that, both parents are on the same page and how they're going to respond to their child's behavior, and how they're going to discipline, and how they're, the values that they're going to teach in their family. And it takes time, and it's not a perfect process. And that's part of the beauty of it too, is that as your, parents are dealing with these challenging situations, it's an opportunity for them to grow as a person as well. And, it's sort of like this perfectly imperfect situation and growth experience for the family,
Yeah. What do you say to the parent who says, I'd love to take your course. I think it's super awesome, but I don't even have time to think straight. What do you tell them? Because I'm sure that happens, right?
Yeah, well, I definitely kept that in mind when I was, outlining this course. The training videos are short and sweet. They're about 10 to 15 minutes. And then the assignments that I give them are really hands-on, really practical. And I give, it's 14 days, but in between trainings, I give parents a couple days to implement the strategies. And they have access to this Facebook group, even after the 14 days. So if they miss a training video, they can always go back and rewatch it. And yeah, I definitely was keeping that in mind when I was creating this.
I'm sure you
so
were,
that they can watch it in bite-sized pieces, apply what they learned, and then go on to the next training video.
So is the Facebook group something that all of the students who go through your course will eventually be enrolled in for like as an ongoing thing?
So at this point, kind of what I'm envisioning, and it might change, but that I will have, so like my next training starts in April, and I'll have the Peaceful Parenting Method April Facebook group. And then my plan is to do this monthly. So I'll have the April Facebook group, I'll have the May Facebook group, and so on and so forth. And then I might do like a Peaceful Parenting Method alumni group. So for everybody that's gone through the training, there's a place for them to go collectively, and so that they can continue to, interact and engage with one another and share stories and share, frustrations and share parenting wins and, really depend on one another and support one another as well.
I think that's a great idea and a great resource because, in my own experience for whatever I'm trying to get better at or learn, simply just scrolling through a valuable Facebook group like this one and seeing what other people are doing. And I view it as like sharing these best practices for whatever you want to do. That's a huge value add on the back end of your course there, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think so. And a big part of my vision is to create a community. And so I think that, what such a blessing to have technology and to have the ability to do this, where people can congregate online and share and support, without having to worry about, distance and time. It's just a really accessible way for them to be able to do that.
Yeah, well, and we're so fortunate to be living in the age that we are here where we don't have to travel or go to another city or, someone from around the world can enroll in your course and have all that access and benefit. We're really fortunate.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a really cool time to be living.
It's so great. Yeah, because there's just so many resources available, to improve our lives. So back to your work with the families and helping them create harmony, where do you find you're putting more, I guess, in effort and work on like the parent side or the kid side? I mean, where do you, I know you look at it holistically, but as far as like the logistics, do you find that you start with the parent and then work to the kid, or how do you approach that whole scenario there as far as to create that harmony?
Well, I think it's so individual for each family. I think that, every family is unique, every child is unique, every, relationship is unique. And that's really how I view, parent and child is it's a relationship. And so there's the parent and there's all of their thoughts and feelings and beliefs and actions. And then there's the child and their thoughts and feelings and beliefs and actions. And then there's the relationship between the two, and the different personality types. And so it's, even parents who have like 3 kids, for example, a parenting strategy that works well with one kid may not necessarily work well with the other.
Mm-hmm.
And, and also a parenting strategy that works well with one child for a time may not work well as they get older and they evolve. And so that's why I teach a lot of principles. I mean, I do teach I give parents tools, and I give them, specific strategies that they can apply right away, with kind of the caveat that, okay, keep in mind, these might work for a while, but your child's going to grow and evolve, and you're going to have to kind of grow and evolve with them. And also your relationship with your child is going to grow and evolve as well. Does that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think you've touched on something really interesting. It's this kind of the ultimate frustration and the ultimate fun of being a human being, right? Is the game board is always changing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And that is a perfect point, because I think as speaking from my own perspective, is we want to just know, okay, so no, what do I have to do to get the result, and I'll do it and do it and do it. But you're right. The child changes, we change, the environment changes, different influence and stimuli comes in. It really is a dynamic process, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. When you're talking about that, for some reason, I started thinking about like weightlifting, for example. And I just went to my first CrossFit class last night.
Wow.
And, if you're not constantly changing your workout, you're not going to continue to grow and change, right?
Yeah,
so
good
it's like
point.
you kind of have to adjust and change. You can't just do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. You've got to have lots of different tools.
Yeah, well, and that's so true.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy, right? I mean, yeah, they got to confuse those muscles to get them, or they get like stuck in the mode of whatever you've been doing, and then growth stops, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I think I just think we're looking for like the simple answer, but maybe the simple answer is that there's just this constant changing situation, and you have to be constantly adapting to that.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that a big part of what I teach is creating awareness around, not only the parent creating awareness around their own thoughts and feelings and belief systems and how they, carry themselves and show up in the world, but also teaching kids how that awareness of their own thoughts and feelings, how those thoughts and feelings impact their actions, how it impacts how they show up in the world, how it impacts how they respond to outside circumstances, how it impacts their relationships, and really teaching them the tools of how they get to manage all of that so that they can live their best life, and so that they can show up in the way that they want to and have quality relationships and a quality life. And be able to respond in a way that's congruent and, beneficial for both them as an individual, and also, cooperatively for the people in their life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on this a little earlier as well, that obviously address those inner issues. Did you always do that in your work, in your current work and where you're transitioning, or is that kind of an evolution too, as far as looking at the emotional and like inner aspect of why a child may be behaving in this way or struggling?
That's a great question. So in my earlier career, I did like traditional ABA, which is like applied behavioral analysis, which is really, based off of kind of like this punishment reward system, and being able to shape behavior based off of, punishment reward. And of course, in the work that I did, I mean, we didn't do punishment, but we did a lot of like positive reinforcement. And it was effective and it worked. And I still think that there's a time and a place for it. I mean, I'm not completely against it, but I think that for me, and I always kind of knew in the back of my mind, I didn't know it at the time, but there was just always something where I was like, something just doesn't feel authentic about this. There's something missing. And so, as I went to grad school, learned about, social thinking, social cognition, social emotional development, and how essential that is. And I remember kind of thinking like, there's something to this. This is important, but I didn't dive right in to it at that point. It's just really been in the last 2-3 years that I've really dove into that. And I think it just came from me starting to see how children show up to therapy sessions differently based off of like, are their needs being met, and what is actually happening, internally, and how that's impacting how they're showing up to therapy sessions. And so, so now I look at it from more of like an inside out approach. So, what is happening internally, and how can we teach a child to develop their own internal guidance system, and how can we teach them to really figure out what's happening inside of them so that they can manage their own behavior rather than behaving a certain way because there's either a reward or punishment.
Yeah.
That being said, there are a lot of like intrinsic rewards to, doing certain things. And, we get paid for going to our job and stuff like that. However, it's just, I think it's important that we really teach kids how to develop those skills to navigate their own world based off of their own intrinsic, sense of altruism and values as well. So they're not constantly reliant on outside influences.
Yeah, I really love that because it's more of like an inner, I guess, perspective or inner kind of from the inside out kind of thinking, as opposed to, because you're right, we do need the external stimulus, the paycheck, those kind of things and everything. But when you create and act from within, it seems to become much more like self-sustaining and just all around better.
Right. Yeah. And it's also tapping into a child's like natural tendency towards altruism, and we all have it. That's what makes us human. We're social creatures, and so if there's too much focus and emphasis on teaching a child like, don't do this because if you do this you're going to get in trouble, then it actually becomes more serving, like kind of a selfish act, that they're going to act a certain way because they don't want to get in trouble, versus I'm going to act a certain way because it's the right thing to do, and because I want to connect with other human beings, and I want to form strong integrated bonds with others, and I want to do what's right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It sounds like a deeper reason than just, oh, I'm not going to get in trouble, or oh, I'm going to get a cookie or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that.
And that being said, like I said, there's a time and a place, and I use positive reinforcement sometimes with kiddos. Like, all right, let's do 10 trials working on this exercise, and then we'll do we'll play with some bubbles, or play a game or something. As long as it's just, that's not the default strategy every time, that you're really teaching kids the skills they need to self-regulate. And to have that sense of personal power in their life, in addition to getting through the day-to-day.
Well, and you're right. I mean, we are human beings, and we have, it sounds like you use the full spectrum of, from, inner kind of motivation and drive, and up to, like having playtime, which we do need that too, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
How much has your yoga practice and your own spiritual and emotional, I guess, journey fed into your work? How's that affected that?
Well, I first got certified as a yoga teacher, and when I went through the training, I kind of had in the back of my mind that maybe I'll teach this to kids, because I was already working with kids. And then I did start teaching it to kids, and I started to see how much of an impact it was making on them, and it was helping them. And then I think that's really when I started to think, like, there's something to this mindfulness thing, and really teaching kids how to self-regulate, how to manage themselves, so that they can be ready to learn when they're at school, or be ready to learn when they're at a therapy session with me, or be able to get along okay with their siblings and their family.
Yeah.
So I think in that way, just being able to observe that and see the change has made a difference and has, really solidified that the work that I'm doing is important.
Yeah.
But I think,
Well, and it is holistic. It's like looking at the, the holistic child too, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. Mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
Kind of another example of, just like the body mind connection. I had a kiddo who was really having a hard time with focusing and paying attention. And she would kind of like slump in her seat, and she would, always be kind of like, she'd like fall on the floor and be like, all right, we need to, focus, pay attention. And then I got to talking to her mom a little bit, and I found out that she actually never crawled as a baby. She went right to walking. And for those people that don't know, so crawling actually is really essential for developing a lot of core stability and strength. And so I was like, I think the reason she's slumping in her chair so much and she's just like, falling to the ground, I think she's got poor core strength and stability. It was just kind of a hypothesis I had. And so I encouraged their mom to just do like little, yoga exercises with their little, that involved the core strengthening. And, it's kind of an anecdotal story, but I noticed a change. I noticed a change, almost immediately as they started incorporating that, and she was paying attention. And so I think that's why it's really important to look at the whole child and to really look at what's below the surface, because, she was, I think, only 4 at the time, but had she gotten older and gone to school, a teacher may have just thought she's just not paying attention. She's, and she may get in trouble for that, when really it's because she's spending so much time and energy thinking about keeping herself upright that she can't think about anything else that's going on. So,
well, and I think that's really awesome that you shared that story, because, given your background, on the kind of the clinical psychological side, and also then the yoga side, and just being obviously a very aware person yourself and looking at the whole person or the whole being, you're like, well, maybe this, because sometimes I think we get narrow focus and we find what we're looking for, or we look for what we want to find, whatever, and we may miss out on that. That's something that another person may miss out on, and just continue to try to fix the problem with the only tool they've got, instead of going, okay, let's take a look here.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Step back and see what could be another possible.
Yeah, because like you said, we are whole, we're mind, body, and spirit. And if any of those things, or if there's some foundational piece missing, the whole system is not as good as it could be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. So tell people how they can get in touch, how they can find your book, share the peaceful parenting side. Give us how we can get in touch with you.
So the Brave Enough to Fly will be available on Amazon. Peaceful Parenting Method, I will share a link with you.
Yes, I'll put that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
And I'll also link to your book.
Yeah. And then I have a website. It's under construction right now. So
okay. We don't have to share it. I can share it when it comes up. How's that?
Sure. That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds great. And then I'm on Facebook and Instagram.
Or go ahead. Are you on Instagram and you say you have Facebook too, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I'm very active on Facebook and fairly active on Instagram.
Share what are your Instagram, and I'll also link to this, but just for people who are listening, share what are your Instagram and Facebook, I guess URLs. Do you have that?
So my Instagram is just Jenny_Hoskins.
Okay.
And then my Facebook is Jenny Hoskins, although there are a lot of Jenny Hoskins. So.
Are there? we'll narrow it down in the show notes and making sure we capture the right one.
Okay.
Okay, so what's next? Obviously, you shared a lot of what you got going on, and you are very busy right at the moment. do you have any like projects in the work that you would care to, I guess, give us a little bit of a teaser of, or are you, obviously you're so busy right now, but do you have anything on the far horizon you're working on that you want to share with us?
Oh gosh. I do have some ideas for some new children's books.
I'm sure you do. Yeah.
Although I'm right now I'm really endeavoring to stay focused on, launching Brave Enough to Fly, and then also launching this training. Like I said, I love to have my energy going out in different directions and having a lot of plates spinning. And right now I'm like, all right, I'm going to just focus my energy on these two things. And then once I get these rolling out and, kind of get some systems in place, and get some success there, then I'll probably start working on those other children's books. So
yeah, well,
yeah.
this obviously sounds like a really busy time for you with the launch of your course and your book. So I know that you've got to kind of keep the focus on the present moment, right? Keep it in the now instead of looking forward. But given what I've seen you, producing now, I am really excited to see what that comes down the line. Because like I say, the book seems awesome. The book is awesome, I should say. The course appears to be phenomenal for parents, and I think it's really going to be beneficial to them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Jenny, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. It's been great.
Thank you. Well, what'd you think? Did you get some value out of this episode? If you did, let me know. Let me know what your experience was. The best place to do that, as I mentioned, is always on YouTube. Leave a comment, share it with someone who you think might also benefit from hearing it. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to the channel. That is youtube.com/gmarkphillips. You can also find complete show notes and links to all the resources that Jenny mentioned in this episode on my website, gmarkphillips.com. I want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to Jenny for sharing her wisdom and insight with us, spending time with us on the podcast, and helping you parents out there create more peace and harmony in your life. That's the episode. I really want to thank you for listening. I do really appreciate it. Until next time, all the best, health, wealth, and success. Bye-bye.